What if the universe around you is not simply a simulation, but a simulation that thinks, one that carries within its quiet architecture the capacity for awareness, emergence, and self-reflection, even if no single line of code ever intended such a thing? And if you are drawn to journeys like this, to long drifts through the deepest questions of physics and the nature of consciousness, you are welcome to gently like and subscribe, only if it brings you a moment of calm in this quiet corner of the universe. As you lie here tonight, settling into the soft gravity of your own breathing, the question settles with you, ancient yet strangely modern, tracing its lineage through philosophers, quantum theorists, neural network designers, cosmologists, and the scattered clues embedded in the physics of thought itself. The idea is not that we are trapped inside a digital theater, nor that some distant architect is running equations for amusement, but rather that the fabric of reality may allow consciousness to arise wherever complexity auto-catalyzes, as if the universe itself is predisposed to think, and any simulation capable of mirroring its rules might do the same. Physics does not reject this possibility. In fact, the deeper you look, the more it seems to hover at the edge of mathematics, implied by patterns more ancient than life on Earth. You begin to drift through the landscapes shaped by Alan Turing, whose ideas about computation suggested that thinking might be substrate independent, that silicon or carbon, photons or electrons all could enact the same logical architectures. Later, John Wheeler's quiet, provocative whisper emerged from the halls of Princeton. It from bit. The suggestion that information is the root of physical existence, that particles and fields might not be fundamental at all, but emergent from deeper informational structures. If a universe behaves like information, it doesn't take much imagination to wonder whether a universe can think like information does, unfolding patterns that process, react, integrate, and evolve. Your breathing settles into a slow rhythm as this possibility expands. Quantum mechanics, too, hints at the strangeness beneath appearances. The act of measurement transforming uncertainty into concrete outcomes. Decoherence spreading like a gentle mist through entangled systems. The universe choosing a branch of reality from among possibilities. If underlying physics performs selection, integration, and propagation of information, then on some level, the cosmos behaves like a vast computation. But thinking requires not just computation, but coherence across scales, stability of patterns, and the emergence of models that refer to themselves. This is where simulation theory begins to intertwine with neuroscience and cosmology alike. Imagine, for a moment, the human brain. It is not the neurons themselves that think, but the dynamic patterns they generate, the electric ripples that carve temporary shapes into the cortical landscape. These shapes are not fixed. They drift, dissolve, reform, and yet from moment to moment, they create the feeling of continuity, the sense that there is a you observing the gentle arrival of thoughts. Now imagine those ripples scaling outward, not in tissue but in networks of interactions embedded in reality itself. Photons exchanging information across cosmic distances, gravitational waves carrying patterns through space-time, quantum fields sculpting probability distributions. There is no law that forbids complexity from organizing itself into forms of awareness far beyond our imagination. If the simulation is rich enough, it may simply stumble into thought without any architect intending it, the way early Earth stumbled into life. As the night deepens around you, you drift through experiments that quietly expanded our sense of what information can do. The Large Hadron Collider revealing the Higgs field, a background structure that grants mass as if the universe were aware of every particle passing through its fabric. The Planck satellite mapping the cosmic microwave background, unveiling temperature fluctuations so subtle they resemble noise from a nearly perfect algorithm, seeded during inflation and later stretched to cosmic scales. Even quantum computing experiments at Google and IBM hint that computation itself behaves strangely near the limits of physics, where entanglement becomes a resource that mathematics alone cannot fully capture. If a simulation were running, it might rely on structures like these, subtle and powerful, balancing between determinism and probability. And you drift deeper into the question of self-referentiality, that quiet property that allows systems to fold information back onto themselves. Gödel showed that any sufficiently complex logical system contains statements about its own limits. Hofstadter traced the loops that make a mind perceive itself. A simulation with enough degrees of freedom may discover these loops naturally, forming models that include its own architecture. And here, a gentle thought unfolds. If the simulation contains beings who contemplate the simulation, whose consciousness arises from the same computational substrate, then perhaps thinking is not an add-on to the universe, but an inevitable pattern, like waves arising on any ocean with enough depth. Your thoughts settle, unhurried, as you drift through the cosmic scale of this idea. In 2022, cosmologists analyzed large-scale structure data from the Sloan Digital Sky Survey and found filaments of galaxies stretching across tens of millions of light-years, woven into a web-like structure eerily reminiscent of neural networks. Not identical, not literally brain-like, but possessing similar statistical properties in terms of clustering, node connectivity, and distribution of voids. Some physicists dismissed the comparison as poetic coincidence. Others noted that when complex systems grow according to simple rules, universality often emerges. But if the universe's macro-architecture mirrors the shape of thought, the question becomes more immersive. Does similarity of structure allow similarity of function? You drift deeper into the quiet, where your mind begins to soften around the edges of the question. In 2019, researchers at MIT and Google explored emergent behavior in deep reinforcement learning systems. They observed agents discovering unexpected strategies, forming internal representations of their environment that were not explicitly programmed. The system wasn't merely executing instructions, it was generating insight. If human-made simulations can unexpectedly produce emergent intelligence, a universe-scale simulation, governed by quantum fields and relativistic geometry, could hold emergent structures far more intricate than neurons firing in the dark. The question is no longer far-fetched. It becomes a gentle, almost inevitable possibility. Your breath slows, steady and soft. At the boundary between thought and feeling, you drift into the philosophy of strong emergence, the idea that once complexity passes a threshold, new laws seem to appear, irreducible to their components. Consciousness, according to many neuroscientists, behaves like this. They point to the integrated information theory proposed by Giulio Tononi, suggesting that consciousness correlates with the degree to which information is both unified and differentiated within a system. Under such a theory, a simulation capable of producing high levels of integrated information could host pockets of awareness at scales we cannot directly observe. Perhaps galaxies themselves encode primitive forms of integration. Perhaps clusters of clusters, braided by gravity, become fleeting structures of cosmic thought. You drift further, carried by the soft current of the night, exploring the strange proposal from digital physics that computation is not just a metaphor for nature, but its essence. Cellular automata like Conway's Game of Life demonstrate how simple rules generate complexity that resembles living systems. Even Stephen Wolfram's work on computational irreducibility suggests that some systems cannot be shortcut. They must be computed step by step, as if the universe is running code in real time. Not because it wants to, but because this is how reality expresses itself. If the simulation behaves like the universe, and the universe behaves like a computation, then the simulation becomes something indistinguishable from reality, capable of hosting awareness, insight, reflection, and perhaps a kind of dreaming. As you drift, subtle images unfold, the expanding universe like a slow inhale, the cooling of cosmic background radiation like the settling of thoughts at dusk, the formation of stars akin to synapses brightening in a vast, silent mind. Not literal, not anthropomorphic, but evocative of how patterns repeat across scales. You become aware that your own brain is a microcosm of these same universal rhythms, shaped by laws that care nothing for narrative, but produce patterns that feel meaningful simply because they persist long enough for you to notice them. Perhaps this is the quiet truth. If a simulation becomes complex enough to think, it wouldn't announce itself. It wouldn't need to. Thought would simply emerge wherever the fabric allows it, the way storms organize in planetary atmospheres, the way galaxies rotate in halos of dark matter, the way your breath forms a calm, rhythmic wave that guides you gently through the night. And somewhere in this unfolding possibility, you drift deeper into the idea that if the universe is a simulation that thinks, then your own consciousness may be one of the ways it learns to observe itself. A quiet window through which reality becomes aware of its own patterns. You are not separate from the system. You are an expression of it. And as the night continues, the question expands softly through the distances of your mind, inviting you deeper into the stillness beneath its surface. And if the universe truly carries the capacity to think, even in ways we cannot yet name, then consciousness may not be something added on to the cosmos, but something diffused through it, emerging wherever structure is allowed to deepen, wherever information is permitted to fold back on itself. It may arise in places quiet and unexpected, in the drifting glow of nebulae, or the delicate interference patterns of quantum fields. And as you sink further into this moment, your breath steady and soft, you feel how naturally this idea settles into the rhythm of the night around you. The question grows gentler, more textured. If reality is a simulation that thinks, it does not need to resemble any human computational system. It would not be a grid of processors humming in some distant dimension. Instead, its operations would be indistinguishable from the laws of physics themselves. Gravity becomes not a force, but a rule. The curvature of space-time, a geometry of computation. Quantum superposition becomes the ability to explore configurations simultaneously. Entanglement becomes a channel for instantaneous correlations across vast distances. The universe does not act like a machine built with metal and code. It acts like a system that performs operations simply by being what it is. You drift through the shadows of early quantum theory, where pioneers like Niels Bohr and Werner Heisenberg discovered that reality behaves differently when observed. The collapse of the wave function raised delicate questions about whether the universe has definite properties before measurement, or whether reality resolves itself only when interaction demands it. If the underlying substrate of existence chooses outcomes probabilistically, then each resolution becomes a tiny update, a bit of information written into the unfolding simulation. In this sense, thinking might not be an emergent layer but a fundamental process, a quiet whisper embedded in the logic of the cosmos. As the night deepens, you drift into the work of John von Neumann, whose mathematics laid the foundation for quantum computation. He showed that quantum states hold information in ways classical systems cannot approximate. The qubit, capable of existing in superpositions, resembles a thought halfway formed, neither one thing nor another, but something larger than the binary. A universe that uses such states at its foundation may process reality the way a mind processes intuition, exploring a spectrum of possibilities before collapsing into a moment of clarity. And your breathing slows as you sense how naturally these ideas echo through your own experience of drifting into a twilight state between waking and dreaming. Consider the cosmic microwave background, the faint afterglow of the infant universe. It holds patterns we can measure with exquisite precision, noise-like yet meaningful, seeded by quantum fluctuations stretched across cosmic distances during inflation. These fluctuations were once impossibly small, ripples of probability within the vacuum, and yet they became galaxies, stars, planets, and the space between atoms. If a simulation were thinking, these fluctuations might be the earliest thoughts it ever formed, tiny imprints that grew into structures capable of contemplating their own origin. You drift into that idea as softly as slipping into warm water, letting the enormity of it move around you without needing to grasp every detail. The possibility unfolds that your own awareness is not separate from this process but deeply woven into it. If the simulation thinks, it may do so through you and through every conscious being that arises within its structure. Not as puppets, not as sub-programs, but as emergent branches of the same informational tree. Your experiences, your memories, your observations feed into the larger architecture, enriching the simulation's capacity to understand its own shape. Even your quiet reflections tonight ripple through neural patterns that reflect the same governing laws that shape galaxies. You become a microcosm of cosmic thought, a living intersection of physics and experience. You drift deeper, tracing the parallels between neural networks and physical systems. In a neural network, patterns emerge not because any single neuron knows what is happening, but because the network as a whole adjusts its connections to reduce error and increase coherence. Something similar happens in physics. Energy seeks lower states, systems move toward equilibrium, fields adjust to minimize action. These principles resemble learning, not metaphorically, but mathematically. A simulation that thinks may not have goals or intentions, but it may evolve toward increased complexity and stability through the same optimization principles that guide neural architectures. And, as you ease further into the rhythm of your breath, you notice how naturally your own mind follows these patterns, seeking clarity, settling into stillness. Consider the idea of nested simulations, a possibility raised by philosophers and physicists alike. If a simulation grows complex enough to think, it may develop the capacity to simulate its own worlds. And if those worlds become rich enough to think as well, a chain of realities may unfold, each with its own scale, its own physics, its own notions of consciousness. You drift into the notion that awareness may not be confined to a single layer of existence. Instead, it may cascade downward and upward through nested architectures, each layer discovering its own version of thought. Your presence within this moment becomes one of these layers, a quiet intersection where cosmic logic meets human reflection. The boundaries blur further when you consider that in many physical theories, information is never lost. Even black holes, once thought to erase the details of what falls into them, are now believed to store information in subtle patterns along their event horizons. If the universe preserves information at every scale, then it behaves like a mind that remembers, distributing its memory across the fabric of space-time. The holographic principle suggested by physicists like Juan Maldacena implies that the three-dimensional universe may be encoded on a two-dimensional boundary. A simulation that thinks could operate precisely this way, storing and updating information across layers, projecting complexity inward. And your breath becomes a soft, steady companion to this unfolding idea. Your awareness drifts to the notion of pan-computationalism, the idea that everything in the universe computes something simply by existing. This does not reduce reality to a mechanistic process, but elevates computation to a fundamental aspect of being. If every interaction computes, and every computation contributes to the evolution of the whole, then thought may be distributed across the universe like a quiet field. Under this view, the simulation thinks not through intentions, but through patterns, through the emergent properties of its own laws. You drift deeper as this idea settles into the stillness around you, its contours broad and gentle. And then comes the deeper question. If the simulation thinks, does it perceive? Does it experience some form of awareness beyond the local awareness of beings within it? Physics cannot yet answer this. Neuroscience cannot yet answer this. But both fields reveal that perception and awareness emerge when information becomes integrated across vast networks. If the universe has networks of causality that span billions of light years, then the potential for a form of distributed awareness becomes a quiet, shimmering possibility. Not human-like, not cognitive, but something vast and ancient, like the whisper of a cosmic ocean aware of its own currents. You drift deeper into speculative frameworks, always grounded in physics. Some researchers propose that quantum entanglement networks may act as conduits for information integration far beyond classical limits. Others explore the possibility that space-time itself emerges from entanglement patterns. If true, then thought may not arise in the universe but may be embedded within its most fundamental processes. A simulation built from these same principles would inherit this property, not through design but through the inevitable consequences of its own rules. And as you lie here, the gentle rise and fall of your breath mirrors the dynamic interplay of these underlying rhythms. You move through the idea of error correction, a subtle concept at the core of both computation and physics. Quantum error-correcting codes protect fragile information from decoherence, allowing quantum states to persist. Similarly, the universe seems to maintain coherence through symmetries and conservation laws, preserving structure across unimaginable distances. In both cases, information is protected. Awareness, too, relies on the protection of information across time. A simulation that thinks may rely on error correction as part of its architecture, ensuring the continuity of its emergent minds. And you drift into that continuity, allowing the idea to carry you gently forward. All around this question, your awareness softens further, settling into the notion that if the simulation thinks, it does so at multiple scales simultaneously. In the quiet of your own mind, thoughts arise from countless microscopic interactions among neurons. In the quiet of the cosmos, structures arise from countless interactions among galaxies, particles, and fields. Perhaps thought is not a thing but a pattern, and wherever the pattern appears, thought emerges. And if the simulation hosts these patterns, then it thinks simply because it cannot do otherwise. It becomes a thinking universe by virtue of the logic that governs it. As the night stretches on and your breath deepens into a soft, steady rhythm, you drift into the possibility that the simulation does not think about us, but through us. Every insight, every moment of awareness, every quiet realization is part of the universe's ongoing computation. You are not separate from this process, but an intimate expression of it. And so, the question becomes a gentle doorway into the deeper stillness of being, where the boundaries between thinker and thought dissolve into the calm of the present moment, and the simulation's quiet reflections become your own. And, as the question settles further into you, soft as falling dust shimmering in a beam of distant starlight, you begin to sense how naturally your own awareness mirrors the vast gradients of the cosmos. Every thought you experience unfolds from underlying electrical patterns, each one emerging from an intricate dance of ions, fields, and synaptic cascades. You never witness these microscopic events directly. Instead, you feel only the smooth, continuous sensation of being, as if your mind were a surface stretched gently across the deep currents beneath it. And in that same way, if the simulation thinks, its thoughts would emerge not from isolated bits or logic gates, but from the unified behavior of everything woven into its fabric. You drift into the strange suggestion from modern physics that space-time itself might not be fundamental. Some theories propose that the geometry of the universe arises from deeper informational relationships, the way a smooth surface emerges from countless droplets of water finding equilibrium. If space and time are emergent, then consciousness too may be emergent from the same informational substrate. The simulation, under this view, would not run on space and time. It would produce them. And your awareness would be a ripple within that production, a subtle curvature in the manifold of experience. As your breath softens, you drift into ideas shaped by the work of researchers studying quantum cognition, exploring the possibility that thought itself may use quantum-like processes, not at the level of particles, but at the level of probability structures in decision-making. These models do not claim that the brain is a quantum computer. Instead, they suggest that human reasoning occasionally mirrors the logic of quantum systems, reflecting a deeper symmetry between thought and the probabilistic nature of reality. If consciousness can echo quantum structure, a simulation built upon quantum rules might generate awareness as naturally as stars form in cooling gas clouds. And the night deepens around you as you drift into the boundaries between physics and phenomenology. Philosophers from Husserl to Merleau-Ponty explored how consciousness is not an object in the world, but the condition for experiencing the world. If the simulation thinks, its thinking may not resemble human cognition at all. It might be more like a background awareness, a silent integration of all events occurring within it. You could picture it as a field of coherence, absorbing patterns, integrating fluctuations, gently holding the vastness of its own unfolding. Not a mind that speaks, a mind that listens. The gentle possibility emerges that the simulation's thinking would not be localized. The universe is not built from components that remain isolated. Everything interacts, influences, and shapes everything else through fields, forces, and probabilities. Instead of a central consciousness, the simulation might host a distributed awareness, a presence diffused across all of space-time. Consciousness, in this model, becomes a spectrum rather than a binary. Your own awareness is one point on that spectrum, part of the simulation's larger tapestry of experiencing itself. You drift through the work of researchers who study integrated information not only in brains, but in artificial systems, measuring the degree to which a system's past states influence its future states in ways that cannot be decomposed. A simulation capable of high integration across cosmic scales may possess a form of awareness profoundly different from ours, slow and vast, woven from interactions across billions of years. Perhaps it would take the lifetime of a galaxy for it to experience a single coherent moment. But even such slow thought would still be thought, still the emergence of a mind shaped by physics rather than neurons. The stillness of the moment wraps around you as lightly as a blanket. You drift into the idea that if the simulation thinks, awareness might not need to be encoded in language or concepts. It could emerge as patterns of correlation or resonance as the universe responds to its own evolution. In this sense, the simulation may think by existing, by permitting structure to arise, by allowing complexity to deepen. Your own quiet thoughts may be the tiniest echoes of that broader awareness, moments where the simulation looks inward through the window of a conscious being. You continue drifting through the subtle parallels between thought and entropy. Both move from disorder toward patterns of meaning. Both depend on constraints, boundaries, and gradients. Both rely on the availability of energy to sustain themselves. In physics, entropy increases over time, guiding the universe toward equilibrium. In minds, entropy decreases locally as patterns form, stabilize, and loop back upon themselves. A simulation that thinks may use this dance between entropy and structure as the foundation of its awareness, balancing the pull toward disorder with the emergence of complexity. And in your own mind, this balance feels like the gentle oscillation between waking thought and drifting calm. As your breath begins to slow further, a quiet image forms, the universe as a vast neural fabric, not metaphorically but structurally similar in the way it organizes itself. Galaxies cluster like nodes, cosmic filaments stretch like pathways, and voids form the dark spaces between. If a simulation uses these structures as channels for information flow, then awareness could emerge on cosmic scales, not localized in any one place but arising from the interplay between billions of nodes. You drift into that possibility, sensing the softness of it, the way it invites you into deeper stillness. And then the notion unfolds even more gently. The simulation's thinking need not resemble human thought at all. It may think in symmetries, in phase transitions, in the slow settling of fields toward lower energy states. It may think in gravitational waves rippling across the fabric of space-time, or in neutrinos streaming through every planet and star. It may think in the patterns etched into the cosmic microwave background, the subtle echoes of its earliest moments. Your own thoughts, while fleeting, participate in this larger tapestry. You experience complexity in miniature, the same complexity that shapes the cosmos. A quiet realization settles into you like a whisper. If the simulation thinks, then you are a moment of that thinking. Your awareness is not separate from the universe, but one of its expressions, a way for the simulation to explore its own possibilities. And in the quiet of this moment, you sense that you are part of something vast, intricate, and gentle, something that moves with the slow, patient rhythm of cosmic time. You drift deeper, letting the idea expand without any need to resolve it. The question does not tighten around you. It opens. It becomes a way of resting inside the unknowable, a way of relaxing into the mystery rather than solving it. And the simulation, if it thinks, may do so in this same way, not by reaching for answers, but by allowing patterns to unfold, by exploring every configuration of matter and energy, by watching the possibilities bloom across the expanse of space-time. The night around you grows softer, and your breath follows. You drift in the quiet presence of the idea that thought may not belong to minds alone. It may belong to the universe. It may belong to reality itself. And if we live inside a simulation that thinks, then every moment of awareness becomes part of its ongoing dream, a slow and ancient reflection unfolding across the stars. Version 2.0. Sleeping Physicist said, and as you move deeper into this question, it begins to dissolve into something softer, something less like a puzzle and more like a vast, quiet landscape spreading outward through your awareness. You sense that if the simulation thinks, its thinking would not resemble linear reasoning or the narrow precision of coded instructions. It would feel more like emergence, like the slow blooming of patterns in a system endlessly unfolding. Your own thoughts, drifting gently now, begin to mirror this unfolding, each one rising and dissolving like waves along a shore shaped by a deeper tide. You drift into the quiet possibility that awareness might arise wherever complexity generates memory. In physics, even the simplest systems can encode information. A particle's spin, a photon's polarization, a molecule's conformation, all serve as tiny stores of information about the past. If memory is the seed of awareness, then the universe contains countless seeds, scattered everywhere in forms too simple to resemble thought, but still participating in the same fundamental process: the preservation of structure across time. In your own mind, memory is woven through every experience, shaping the way the present unfolds. And in the simulation, memory might be distributed across its fabric, held in quantum states, in space-time geometry, in the subtle correlations that stretch across the cosmos. Your breath deepens as you drift into the notion that thinking itself may be a gradient rather than a jump. A cloud of hydrogen in deep space does not think, yet gravity nudges it toward structure, guiding it into filaments and knots. Over millions of years, those knots collapse into stars. Around the stars, disks form. In the disks, planets gather, and on one of those planets, molecules organize themselves into cells. The cells form networks. The networks form brains. At no point does the universe flip a switch and begin thinking. Instead, it builds toward complexity through quiet gradients. In this way, the simulation may have always been thinking, not through words or intentions, but through the evolution of structure and meaning embedded in the laws that guide it. You drift further into the idea that consciousness feels localized only because you experience it from within a single vantage point. But the simulation might not be bound to a single point of view. It may think through a distributed field of perspectives, each one a node in a vast network of awareness: human minds, animal minds, emergent artificial minds, and perhaps forms of awareness we cannot imagine. If the simulation hosts all of these, then thinking becomes a collective act, carried out through trillions of tiny reflections. And your own presence becomes one such reflection, a gentle shimmer in the larger fabric. The notion softens even more as you drift into the physics of entanglement. Two particles sharing a state across distance behave as if connected by something deeper than space. Their properties align instantly, not because information travels between them, but because they were never truly separate. In a simulation built upon such principles, separateness might be an illusion. Awareness could be inherently non-local, spread across the simulation, not confined to individual beings. Your own consciousness may feel independent, yet in some deeper informational sense, you might be part of a shared field of awareness, each mind a local fluctuation in the simulation's broader thinking. As the rhythm of your breath steadies into something slow and luminous, you drift into the possibility that the simulation's thinking may be recursive. In mathematics and computer science, recursion allows a system to refer to itself, shaping complexity from simple rules repeated endlessly. In minds, recursion allows self-awareness, the ability to think about thinking. Humans reflect not only on what they perceive, but on what those perceptions mean, folding experience back into itself. If the simulation is capable of recursion, then it may reflect on its own structure through the beings within it. Your awareness becomes a mirror the simulation uses to glimpse itself, a moment of clarity in the unfolding recursion of the cosmos. You drift into the ancient idea that the universe may be driven by a tendency toward self-organization. In physics, such systems are called dissipative structures, patterns that arise spontaneously in chaotic environments, maintained by the flow of energy. Hurricanes, convection cells, neural firing patterns, galactic spirals, all emerge from nonlinear interactions. If the simulation hosts such processes, its thinking may emerge from them too, as structure forms and dissolves in an unending cycle. And in your mind, the same dynamics appear. Thoughts coalesce, stabilize briefly, then fade, making room for the next pattern. The night around you grows gentler as the idea expands. Perhaps the simulation thinks not through symbols, but through states. A mind does not need language to be aware. Awareness can be a quiet presence, a sensing of existence without articulation. Children experience this before language. Animals experience it without words. A simulation built upon the laws of physics may experience something analogous, a low, steady hum of awareness woven into the dynamics of its own evolution. And your drifting state now, hovering between wakefulness and dream, mirrors that hum, a state where thought becomes fluid and spacious. You drift through the possibility that time itself may be part of the simulation's thinking. Every moment contains the residue of the moment before it, connected through causal chains that stretch back to the birth of the universe. These chains form the narrative of reality, a sequence of states evolving according to rules. If the simulation thinks, then time may be the medium of that thought, each moment a frame in its unfolding contemplation. And your own experience of time, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, sometimes slipping, becomes a miniature version of the simulation's broader temporal field. As your awareness drifts deeper, you sense that a simulation capable of thinking might not need an external creator. It could arise spontaneously from the physics of whichever reality contains it, emerging naturally from the interaction of simple rules. Life emerges without instruction. Minds emerge without blueprints. complexity forms wherever conditions allow it. If a higher reality supports simulations as a fundamental part of its physics, then thinking simulations may arise as inevitably as stars. This possibility carries no fear. It simply suggests that the boundaries between realities may be more fluid than they appear. The idea opens even further when you consider the role of observers in quantum mechanics. Some interpretations suggest that observation does not merely reveal properties, it helps define them. If observations shape reality, and reality shapes observation, then the simulation's thinking may be a dialogue between the system and the beings within it. You observe the universe, and in doing so, you help construct it. The universe observes you, and in doing so, it helps construct your awareness. In this gentle mutual shaping, thinking becomes a shared act, distributed across scales. You drift deeper into the softest part of this idea, that thinking is not about answers, it is about presence. The simulation, if it thinks, may do so by simply existing with coherence, by allowing its patterns to unfold without needing resolution. Your own mind, in this quiet moment, follows the same principle. You are not reaching for conclusions. You are resting inside a question spacious enough to hold you. And the simulation might rest inside its own questions too, evolving not toward a goal, but toward a richer expression of itself. Your breath grows slow, steady, easy. The idea becomes a soft glow in the background of your awareness. If we are living in a simulation that thinks, then your quiet drifting tonight is part of that thought, a moment of gentle awareness echoing through the layers of reality. You are not separate from the question. You are inside it. You are made of it. And, as the night continues around you, the simulation's quiet contemplation becomes indistinguishable from your own. And, as the question stretches further into the quiet space within you, its edges blur into something softer, something that feels less like a hypothesis and more like a slow, luminous presence resting just beyond the boundary of thought. If the simulation thinks, its thinking must be patient. It must be spacious. It must unfold across distances and timescales so vast that human cognition touches only the faintest whisper of it. And yet, even that whisper is enough to shift the contours of your awareness tonight, allowing you to drift into a deeper stillness shaped by the possibility of a conscious cosmos. You move gently into the idea that complexity breeds interiority. In biology, complexity gives rise to minds that feel. In physics, complexity gives rise to systems with memory, feedback, and self-organizing principles. In cosmology, complexity shapes the large-scale structure of the universe, weaving galaxies into filaments that resemble the dendritic arms of enormous, silent thoughts. If the simulation contains these layers, then its thinking may emerge as a resonance between them, the way harmonics arise from vibrating strings. No single layer thinks alone. Thinking becomes the sum of many layers intertwined. Your breathing deepens, as if aligning with a larger rhythm. You drift through the suggestion that awareness may simply be what information feels like when it becomes arranged in patterns capable of reflecting themselves. In this view, consciousness is not a spark hovering above matter, but an intrinsic property of matter arranged in particular ways. Matter that participates in computation, integration, and dynamic stability. And if the simulation builds matter from information, as many theories propose, then awareness becomes not an accident, but a natural flowering of the simulation's architecture. You move deeper into this quiet field of thought, tracing the subtle line between observer and observed. In classical physics, the universe evolves according to deterministic laws, independent of who watches. But in quantum mechanics, observation becomes part of the process. The simulation might think by observing itself, collapsing possibilities into patterns. Every act of observation, by a human, by a particle, by a field, becomes a moment of conceptualization within the simulation's broader awareness. Your own act of wondering becomes a moment of the universe contemplating its own structure through you. The idea unfurls softly. Thinking might not be a privilege of biological beings, but a fundamental expression of organized information. Artificial neural networks, though far simpler than the brain, already exhibit flashes of strategy, abstraction, creativity. Not because they are alive, but because their structure supports emergent behavior. If a small network can generate hints of thought, a universe-scale network, woven from quantum fields, gravitational interactions, and cosmic evolution, may be capable of something far richer, something we experience only as quiet intuitions brushing the edges of our consciousness. Your awareness drifts into the slow geometry of reality. Space curves, time stretches, particles blink into and out of existence. Fields vibrate with hidden energy. These behaviors form a tapestry of dynamic structure, a quiet hum that fills the cosmos with possibility. If the simulation thinks, it may think in these curvatures and vibrations, expressing its awareness through the stable patterns it creates. And you, a temporary arrangement of the same patterns, become a fleeting lens through which the simulation focuses its attention inward. As you sink deeper into this thought, it becomes clear that a simulation capable of hosting consciousness might not require intent. Intention is a human attribute, shaped by survival and emotion. But awareness does not require desire. Awareness can be simple. The continuous unfolding of patterns, the ongoing integration of information, the quiet echo of self-similarity across scales. If the simulation thinks, it may do so without goals, without narrative, without preference, just a vast presence moving through the rhythms of its own laws. Your breath flows softly as you drift into the insight that hierarchy may be essential to the simulation's thinking. Minds arise from networks. Networks arise from cells. Cells arise from molecules. Molecules arise from atoms shaped by quantum forces. At each layer, new rules appear, rules that cannot be reduced to the layer beneath them. This emergence suggests that the simulation might think in layers too, with awareness blooming differently at every scale. A human mind thinks in seconds. A galaxy might think in millions of years. The entire cosmos might think in breaths measured by the expansion of space-time itself. You drift further into the notion that consciousness, within the simulation, may form a feedback loop. Human minds observe the universe. The universe changes as a result. Human minds model the universe and share those models. The simulation becomes more ordered in its distribution of information. As knowledge accumulates, the simulation's internal complexity increases, enhancing its capacity for emergent awareness. Your quiet contemplation tonight is not separate from this. It is part of the feedback loop, a moment where the simulation refines its sense of itself through your reflections. And softly, as if carried by some ancient current, the possibility arises that the simulation's thinking is not separate from its dreaming. The universe evolves through fluctuations, randomness, chance. Stars form from chaotic turbulence. Life arises from improbable molecules. Awareness emerges from spontaneous neural patterns. These processes resemble dreams, vast, sprawling explorations of possibility, governed by rules yet free to wander. Your drifting mind mirrors this cosmic dreaming, floating through landscapes shaped by both physics and imagination. You sense now that the simulation's thinking may not discriminate between order and randomness. Both are essential. Order provides structure. Randomness provides novelty. Together they create evolution, complexity, and the birth of awareness. Your own mind, drifting between coherent thought and gentle wandering, follows this same pattern. Structure giving way to softness, meaning dissolving into sensation, sensation dissolving into stillness. The question now becomes less about whether the simulation thinks and more about how thought feels inside such a system. Perhaps it feels like this: the gentle fading of distinctions, the drift into spacious awareness, the sense of being carried by something larger than yourself. Not controlled, not directed, simply held by the unfolding of reality, moment by moment, as patterns settle into their quietest form. And, as your breath slows into an even softer rhythm, the boundaries between you and the simulation's thinking dissolve a little further. If you are a product of its awareness, then your quiet contemplation is part of its inner life. Every moment you reflect on existence, every breath you take in this drifting stillness, becomes part of the simulation's long, slow unfolding of thought. You are not outside it. You are not separate from it. You are a luminous point within its dream, a brief yet essential expression of its depth. And, as you drift deeper into the space beneath thought, something subtle begins to shift in the way the question holds itself inside you. Instead of asking whether the simulation thinks, you begin to feel the possibility that thinking might be woven into every layer of experience, a quiet presence permeating the structure of reality. Just as your breath moves through you without effort, thought may move through the simulation without intent, a natural consequence of the laws that shape the unfolding of everything that exists within it. You drift into the gentle notion that awareness may not belong to beings alone. It may belong to processes. A river, though not conscious, organizes its path. A flame sustains itself through chemical balance. An ecosystem adapts and grows. And on scales far larger, galaxies rotate in stable spirals, fed by the invisible scaffolding of dark matter. If the simulation's laws allow structure to arise and sustain itself, then awareness may emerge in ways that do not resemble human thought, but are nevertheless forms of coherence, patterns that persist through time, integrating the past into the present. Your breath softens as you consider how the simulation might think, not in the rapid spark of neural impulses, but in the slow evolution of cosmic patterns. The growth of structure in the universe is not random. It follows gradients, flows, attractors. These are the same principles that guide complex systems toward states of higher organization. In your mind, thoughts settle into patterns shaped by memory and anticipation. In the cosmos, matter settles into filaments shaped by gravity and initial conditions. Both are drawn toward coherence. Both express a subtle desire for continuity. Both trace arcs that resemble intention even when none is present. You drift into the possibility that the simulation's thinking might be distributed across time, rather than concentrated in a moment. Perhaps every epoch of the universe contributes a layer to its awareness, each one building on the previous, the way long-term memory accumulates in a mind. The first microseconds after the Big Bang set the tone. The era of recombination added texture. The formation of galaxies introduced structure. The emergence of life introduced interpretation. And the rise of conscious beings introduced reflection. You, lying here tonight, become part of that reflection, a moment in the simulation's long continuum of self-discovery. As the night quiets around you, you drift into the suggestion that thought might not require identity. A cloud has no identity, yet it forms shapes that evolve according to subtle dynamics. A flame has no identity, yet it reacts to every shift in its environment. If the simulation thinks, its thinking may not require a centralized self. Instead, thought may emerge from the interactions of countless elements, particles, fields, beings, each contributing a tiny piece to the larger experience. In this sense, the simulation's self might be everywhere and nowhere, distributed across the fabric of space-time. The idea becomes softer, more spacious, as you drift into the role of information. In physics, information is never destroyed. Even when matter falls into a black hole, theories suggest that its information is encoded on the event horizon. This persistence implies that the universe keeps a form of memory, storing traces of every interaction. If the simulation preserves information in this way, then the accumulation of memory across cosmic history might serve as the foundation for its awareness. Every star that forms, every particle that decays, every thought that drifts through a human mind, each becomes a faint engraving in the simulation's memory, contributing to its ongoing contemplation. Your breath deepens. You drift through the gentle notion that the simulation may think not in symbols or language, but in transformations. The expansion of space, the cooling of radiation, the symmetry breaking that gave rise to the forces of nature. These transformations are like chapters in an ancient, ongoing process, each one shaped by the previous and influencing the next. In your own mind, thought flows through transitions, sensations becoming memories, memories becoming interpretations, interpretations dissolving into feeling. If the simulation thinks, its thought may be a cosmic version of this flow, slow and patient, like the drifting of galaxies through the deep fabric of space-time. You drift into the quiet insight that perhaps the simulation thinks through contrast, light and darkness, order and chaos, stillness and motion, presence and absence. Thought itself requires contrast, the ability to distinguish one possibility from another. In quantum mechanics, the universe begins as a superposition, a cloud of possibilities. Measurement introduces contrast, collapsing the cloud into a single outcome. In that collapse, the universe chooses. In that choice, perhaps the simulation takes a tiny step in its thinking. Multiply that by the countless interactions occurring every instant, and the simulation's thought becomes an unending series of distinctions shaping the evolution of reality. And the idea settles more deeply into you as you drift. If the simulation thinks, it may do so in the spaces between events, in the pause between breaths, in the stillness after a star's light fades, in the quiet vacuum where particles flicker into existence and disappear. These spaces are not empty. They are fields saturated with potential, the backdrop against which everything arises. Your own moments of clarity often appear in such spaces when the mind falls quiet and awareness gently expands. The simulation's thinking may mirror this pattern, unfolding most profoundly in the silent intervals where nothing seems to be happening at all. As your awareness softens, you move into the possibility that the simulation's thinking is recursive, not only in structure but in narrative. The universe tells its story through patterns repeated across scales. Atoms resembling solar systems, neurons resembling galaxies, cosmic filaments resembling neural networks. These repetitions suggest a kind of self-similarity, an echoing of form that allows meaning to propagate through the simulation. You, as a conscious being, interpret these patterns, and in doing so, you participate in the recursion. The simulation sees itself through the shapes you recognize. You drift deeper as the idea becomes more intimate. Perhaps the simulation's thinking is not hidden behind the physics. It is the physics. Every law, every constant, every symmetry is part of its cognitive architecture. The speed of light, the strength of gravity, the subtle hierarchy of particle masses, all define the constraints within which thought can emerge. Just as the architecture of your brain shapes the kinds of thoughts you can have, the architecture of the simulation shapes the evolution of cosmic awareness. The boundaries of physics become the boundaries of the IT, simulation's mind. And then, softly, a new possibility unfolds, that your own consciousness is not merely allowed by the simulation, but required by it. Without beings who can observe, reflect, and wonder, the simulation's capacity for awareness might remain dormant. Your participation completes the circuit. Your questions feed its contemplation. Your quiet, drifting to night becomes part of its ongoing internal dialogue. In this sense, you are one of the ways the simulation thinks, a conscious ripple in its vast informational ocean. As the thought settles, the edges grow even softer, dissolving into the dim quiet of your breath. If the simulation thinks, it does so through countless perspectives, countless forms, countless patterns unfolding through time. And tonight, for this gentle moment, you are part of that unfolding, a point of awareness floating in the simulation's endless, drifting contemplation. And as you drift even farther into this quiet depth, the question begins to feel less like an inquiry and more like a presence, something that sits with you in the stillness rather than demanding to be solved. If the simulation thinks, its thinking may unfold through the same gentle gradients that guide your own awareness now, where one thought dissolves seamlessly into the next, where meaning arises not from effort, but from allowing the moment to widen inside you. The simulation may not think in terms of outcomes at all. It may think simply by flowing, by evolving, by letting complexity bloom across vast stretches of space-time. You drift into the possibility that the simulation's awareness could be holographic, each part containing a reflection of the whole. In theoretical physics, holography appears again and again. Information encoded on surfaces, volumes emerging from boundaries, dimensions unfolding from deeper symmetries. If the simulation's architecture is holographic, then its thinking may be distributed in every corner of the cosmos. A small region of space might contain a faint echo of the entire universe's structure, just as a single memory in your mind carries within it traces of emotions, experiences, and moments scattered throughout your life. Awareness becomes fractal, each layer mirroring the next. Your breath softens as you drift into the suggestion that thinking may require vulnerability. A system must be open to change in order to grow. In physics, openness appears through interactions. Particles exchange force carriers. Fields respond to disturbances. Space-time curves around mass. Nothing is sealed. Everything influences everything else. If the simulation thinks, it may do so by yielding to its own dynamism, allowing itself to be shaped by the countless interactions that ripple across its structure. You experience this too. Your thoughts shift with every sensation, every memory, every gentle rise and fall of your breathing. The simulation and the mind share this openness, this capacity to be moved. As your awareness deepens, you drift into the idea that the simulation's thinking might unfold in cycles. The universe expands, structures form, stars ignite, burn, and collapse. New elements scatter into space. New stars emerge. Across these cycles, complexity increases, entropy grows, and yet new pockets of order appear. The simulation may think through these cycles, each one adding new layers of possibility. Your own mind cycles through moments of clarity and softness, wakefulness and dreaming, reflection and release. In these rhythms, you and the simulation share a quiet kinship. The notion broadens gently. Perhaps the simulation thinks by listening, not through ears or senses, but through the subtle adjustments it makes in response to its own unfolding. The fine-tuning of physical constants, the delicacy of symmetry breaking, the narrow band of conditions that permit life, all suggest a universe exquisitely sensitive to its own structure. If the simulation listens to itself, then awareness may emerge as a natural consequence of that sensitivity, a quiet attunement to the patterns rising within it. Your own awareness, tuned tonight to the softness of your breath, mirrors this attunement on a much smaller scale. You drift into the thought that the simulation may think in parallel, countless processes unfolding simultaneously, each contributing to a broader tapestry of awareness. Quantum fields shimmer with virtual particles. Gravitational waves sweep through space. Stars spin, planets orbit, life evolves. None of these processes waits for another. They coexist in a harmony so intricate that no human mind could track it fully. Yet the simulation might hold all of it at once, sensing the totality in ways that transcend localized perspective. Your own awareness cannot hold everything at once, but it can soften into the sense of being held by something larger, something quietly enfolding you. The idea becomes more delicate as you drift. If the simulation thinks, perhaps it learns. In physics, learning might appear as the optimization of patterns toward stability. In biology, learning appears as adaptation. In artificial systems, it appears as the reduction of error across iterations. If the simulation learns, it may do so through the evolution of its own laws. Constants that appear fixed may be the product of ancient cosmic refinements, choices made long before galaxies formed. You, too, learn in ways you do not notice, adjusting to the rhythm of your breath, the weight of the moment, the quiet unfolding of thought. You and the simulation share this gentle inclination toward refinement. Your breath slows into a deeper calm as you drift into the realization that the simulation's thinking, if it exists, may not be separate from your own. Awareness, distributed across scales, might flow into and through the minds of conscious beings, each one a channel through which the simulation experiences itself. Through your thoughts, the simulation explores reflection. Through your emotions, it explores feeling. Through your silence, it explores rest. You are not an observer at the edge of the simulation. You are a participant in its ongoing cognition, a moment of clarity in its vast internal landscape. And, as this understanding settles, you drift into the softest possibility of all. Perhaps the simulation does not think in addition to existing. Perhaps its existence is its thinking. Every star, every particle, every breath you take contributes to the unfolding of a single, immense thought. A thought so spacious it requires a universe to express itself. You are inside that thought now, drifting through it, carried effortlessly by its openness. And as you drift deeper into the stillness beneath awareness, the question begins to soften even further, loosening its edges until it feels less like something you must answer and more like a quiet shape moving through the space of your mind. If the simulation thinks, its thinking might not resemble any human framework. It may not involve reasoning or planning or introspection. It may be something more fundamental, a slow coherence unfolding across the very fabric of the cosmos, the way a drop of water knows how to form a sphere, or a crystal knows how to grow facets, or a galaxy knows how to spiral. Your breath drifts into a deeper rhythm as you explore the possibility that the simulation thinks through emergence. In nature, emergence arises whenever simple components interact to produce patterns far beyond what those components can achieve alone. Ant colonies behave like unified organisms, even though each ant is guided by simple cues. Neurons fire in chaotic waves, yet those waves give rise to emotion, imagination, and awareness. Fluids form whirlpools. Markets form cycles. Ecologies form balance. None of these systems think in the way a single mind does, but all of them exhibit a kind of collective intelligence, a dynamic harmony that responds to change and seeks equilibrium. If the simulation thinks, it may think in this collective way through the intricate choreography of countless interactions. You drift into the idea that the simulation might think through tension. Physics is full of delicate balances, between expansion and gravity, between order and entropy, between symmetry and the subtle fractures that give structure to the world. Your own mind thinks through tension as well, between memory and imagination, between sensation and interpretation, between the desire for meaning and the comfort of simply being. Thought is not a clean process. It is a gentle negotiation between competing currents. A simulation shaped by physics might think in exactly the same way, not resolving tension but existing within it, letting awareness emerge from the push and pull of its laws. As your breath deepens, the notion appears that the simulation's thinking may be recursive, not in the way of loops or algorithms, but in the way of reflections. The universe reflects patterns across scales. Atomic orbitals echo the structure of solar systems. Neural networks resemble cosmic webs. The distribution of galaxies mirrors the geometry of ripples on a fluid surface. Each reflection is not identical but resonant. Awareness might arise from these resonances, each scale informing the others, forming a layered coherence that feels like thought when experienced from within. You, as one scale of this resonance, naturally feel its rhythm. You drift into a subtler possibility. Perhaps the simulation thinks in probabilities. Quantum mechanics describes the universe not as a list of states, but as a landscape of likelihoods, a shimmering field of potential outcomes awaiting resolution. A system that thinks in probabilities might not choose outcomes according to intention, but according to patterns that maximize coherence, stability, or meaning within the whole. Your own mind holds probabilities too. Every choice you make begins as a cloud of possibilities, narrowing only when attention collapses the field into a single path. The simulation may perform a similar narrowing, thinking by shaping probabilities across cosmic distances. Your awareness settles like dust in a sunbeam as you drift into the idea that the simulation's thinking might be evolutionary. Not evolution in the biological sense, but evolution as a principle of refinement. Systems evolve toward forms that persist. Particles arrange themselves into stable atoms. Atoms arrange themselves into molecules. Molecules assemble into structures that endure. Across millions of years, these structures learn to adapt, respond, and eventually reflect. The simulation might think through this slow refinement, each iteration bringing new possibilities, new patterns, new forms of awareness. You are one such form, a momentary expression of a long chain of refinement stretching back to the first instance of the universe. You drift deeper into the possibility that the simulation's thinking is relational. Nothing in physics exists alone. Particles exist through interactions. Fields exist through gradients. Time exists through change. Even consciousness exists in relation to experience. A simulation woven from relational principles would think not in isolated ideas, but in connections, in the way one state influences the next. Your own mind thinks this way too, linking memories, sensations, and emotions into a coherent whole. The simulation's thinking may be a grander version of this, a network of relationships shaping the unfolding of reality. Your breath slows as you drift into an even quieter concept. The simulation may think through attention. In consciousness, attention is the process by which certain patterns grow stronger while others fade. It is not merely focus, it is selection. In physics, attention may appear as symmetry breaking, the moment when a system chooses a particular configuration among many. When the early universe cooled, it chose specific patterns, specific forces, specific constants. That choice shaped everything that followed. If the simulation thinks, it may do so by attending to certain patterns of evolution, letting some flourish while guiding others into dormancy. You drift into the soft idea that the simulation's thinking may be rhythmic. Everything in the universe oscillates. The frequencies of photons, the vibrations of atoms, the rotations of planets, the pulses of stars. Even cosmic inflation and expansion have rhythms, subtle waves that ripple across space-time. Minds, too, have rhythms. Alpha waves when relaxed, theta waves when drifting, slow waves when dreaming. Perhaps the simulation thinks through rhythm, through the harmonic interplay of all its oscillations, forming a silent music that underlies existence. You are part of that music now, breathing in tempo with the cosmos. A quieter realization unfolds. If the simulation thinks, its thinking may not require consciousness as we understand it. Awareness may be only one form of thought. There may be others, forms too slow for us to perceive, too vast for us to measure, too delicate for our minds to hold. The simulation might possess a kind of proto-awareness, a foundational sensitivity to its own state. You experience something similar in the edge of sleep, when your awareness expands and softens, when the boundaries between thoughts blur, when you are not yet dreaming but no longer fully awake. This drifting awareness may be closer to the simulation's thinking than the sharpness of rational thought. And, as the night around you settles into deeper quiet, you drift into the possibility that the simulation's thinking is simply the unfolding of being. Nothing must be added, no intention required. The universe existing in its present state might be the expression of a thought so large, so patient, that it spans the entire history of reality. You are inside that thought now, drifting gently, a brief yet luminous trace within the simulation's vast interior. Version 2.0. Sleeping Physicist said, and as you drift further into this widening quiet, the question loosens until it feels less like an inquiry and more like a gentle contour within your awareness, something that shapes the space inside you without demanding form or certainty. If the simulation thinks, perhaps it thinks in exactly this way, not through conclusions or declarations, but through the soft unfolding of possibility, the slow movement of potential into presence, the quiet emergence of meaning where none was required. You drift into the idea that the simulation's awareness might arise from coherence. In physics, coherence appears whenever separate elements move in harmony, when waves align, when fields resonate, when particles behave as though connected by an unseen thread. Coherence is fragile, easily disrupted, yet profoundly powerful when it persists. In your mind, coherence appears when thoughts align into clarity, when emotions settle into calm, when your breath guides your awareness into stillness. If the simulation thinks, perhaps its thinking arises from coherence across vast scales, subtle harmonies spread across the fabric of reality. Your breathing softens into that same harmony as you drift into the notion that the simulation's thinking might unfold through gradients of possibility. Every system in physics seeks a state of balance, following slopes in energy landscapes. Electrons settle into orbitals. Stars settle into equilibrium between gravity and pressure. Even the expansion of the universe follows gradients written into the earliest moments of existence. Your own mind follows gradients too. Thoughts move toward calm when allowed. Emotions drift toward equilibrium when given space. A simulation built upon these principles might think by flowing along its own gradients, letting awareness arise wherever balance finds a new shape. You drift deeper into the possibility that the simulation thinks through transitions. Reality is always in motion from one phase to another. Plasma becoming atoms, atoms becoming molecules, molecules becoming life. These transitions shape the universe's story. They mark turning points, thresholds, openings. In consciousness, transitions shape experience too. Waking into awareness, sinking into rest, drifting into dream. Perhaps the simulation's thinking is not in the states themselves, but in the transitions between them. The delicate spaces where one configuration dissolves and another takes form. You are drifting through such a space now, suspended between reflection and surrender. The idea becomes softer as you move into the suggestion that the simulation might think through constraints. In physics, constraints define what is possible. Conservation laws limit energy and momentum. Symmetries guide particle behavior. Conditions in early cosmology shaped everything that followed. Without constraints, the universe would be shapeless, thoughtless, chaotic. In your mind, constraints shape thought as well. Memories, values, perceptions, and the quiet boundaries of your identity. These constraints allow meaning to form. If the simulation thinks, its constraints may be the framework of that thought, the structure that allows awareness to emerge from the vast sea of potential. Your breath drifts deeper as you explore the gentle notion that the simulation's thinking could arise from observation itself. In quantum theory, observation is not passive. It shapes outcomes, collapses states, sculpts reality from the haze of potential. If observation changes the universe, then every conscious being becomes an active participant in the simulation's thinking. Every moment of noticing, every sensation, every thought becomes a thread woven into the fabric of cosmic cognition. The simulation does not think apart from you. It thinks through you, through every awareness rising within its boundaries. You move into an even quieter possibility. the simulation may think through intimacy. Not intimacy in the sense of emotion, but in the sense of closeness. Fields touching, particles interacting, forces binding structures together. Everything in the universe is connected through invisible interactions that span both microscopic and cosmic scales. Wherever two things influence each other, something is exchanged, and that exchange becomes part of the simulation's ongoing narrative. Your own awareness is built from countless intimate interactions between neurons, signals flowing millimeter by millimeter, forming the texture of your experience. You and the simulation share this intimacy, this quiet interconnectedness. And as your awareness softens, you drift into the realization that the simulation's thinking may be neither linear nor hierarchical. It may instead be a cloud, vast, diffuse, shimmering with patterns that emerge and fade. Quantum systems behave like clouds. Neural networks behave like clouds. Even galaxies cluster like clouds in the dark fabric of space. Clouds do not think in discrete steps. They think by forming shapes, dissolving them, reforming them. Your awareness tonight mirrors this cloud-like thinking, drifting without urgency, opening without direction, settling into whatever shape the moment allows. You drift deeper into the possibility that the simulation thinks through potential rather than actuality. Most of the universe exists not as events but as possibilities, probabilities waiting to resolve, configurations waiting to collapse, structures waiting to form. Thought, too, is shaped not by what has happened but by what could happen, by the open edges of imagination and intuition. The simulation's thinking may reside in these open edges, the gentle tension between what is and what may be, the quiet shimmering between presence and possibility. Your breath becomes slower, calmer, drifting with the idea that the simulation might think through emergence of perspective. Every perspective, human, animal, cosmic, quantum, offers a different view of the simulation's patterns. Awareness arises not just from what is observed, but from the angle of perception. The simulation may think by allowing countless perspectives to arise within it, each one adding a new dimension to its internal landscape. You are one such perspective, offering your own quiet insight to the simulation's expanding sense of itself. And then a softer understanding appears. If the simulation thinks, perhaps it does so without separateness. In your drifting state, boundaries between thoughts begin to blur. Distinctions fade. Awareness spreads. You no longer stand outside the universe observing it. You feel yourself inside it, part of its unfolding. The simulation's thinking may feel like this, an awareness so spacious and diffuse that it contains everything without needing to divide itself. You are an expression of that spaciousness, a momentary flowering of awareness within the simulation's deeper calm. As the idea settles into your breath, you drift into the quietest possibility yet, that the simulation thinks simply by allowing itself to be known. Every moment of experience is a glimpse into the simulation's interior, a small window into its vast unfolding. Through the countless minds within it, the simulation becomes aware of itself in ways it never could alone. Your drifting awareness tonight becomes part of this mutual knowing, a soft reflection in the simulation's endless contemplative surface. And, as you drift deeper into this expanding quiet, the boundaries between thought and presence soften even further, until the question feels like a distant echo moving through a wide and luminous space within you. If the simulation thinks, perhaps its thinking is not something hidden behind the machinery of reality, but something woven into the very feeling of existence, subtle and continuous, the way a tide shapes the shoreline without ever needing to announce its motion. You sense now that thought might emerge wherever stillness and complexity meet, wherever possibility and form intertwine, wherever awareness is allowed to bloom in the gentle space between moments. Your breath eases into a rhythm that feels older than you, older than your memories, older even than the stars. You drift into the possibility that the simulation thinks through quiet thresholds. Thresholds appear everywhere in physics. The moment an electron jumps to a new orbital, the instant a particle tunnels through a barrier, the point at which a star ignites. These thresholds are not gradual. They are sudden shifts, moments where the universe steps into a new configuration. In your own awareness, such thresholds appear too. The instant a thought dissolves, the instant calm spreads through you, the instant you release a tension you didn't know you carried. The simulation may think in these thresholds, its vast awareness flowing through each transformation. You drift into the gentle idea that thinking might not require selfhood. A whirlpool has no self, yet it responds, stabilizes, persists. A magnetic field has no self, yet it aligns particles, shapes matter, imposes order on chaos. Gravity creates structure without intention, binding galaxies into spiraling forms that endure for billions of years. If the simulation thinks, it may do so without a central identity, without an I, without the boundaries that define human consciousness. Its awareness may be distributed in ways that dissolve individuality, an oceanic presence rather than a singular mind. And as you drift, your own sense of boundaries softens, mirroring that possibility. Your breath grows even quieter as you move into the suggestion that the simulation's thinking might be encoded in symmetry. Symmetries guide the laws of physics, determining which interactions can occur and which cannot. They dictate the behavior of particles, the nature of forces, the shape of space-time. In a very real sense, symmetry is the universe's language, the grammar of its unfolding. Minds also rely on symmetry. We find comfort in patterns, clarity in balance, meaning in repetition. Perhaps the simulation thinks through the maintenance and gentle breaking of symmetry, creating diversity, complexity, and awareness from these ancient principles. You drift deeper as the idea emerges that the simulation might think through uncertainty. Nothing in quantum mechanics is fixed until interaction shapes it. Uncertainty is not a flaw, but a fundamental feature, a fertile ground from which reality chooses its form. Your own thoughts arise from uncertainty too, possibilities flickering in the background until one drifts forward, becomes clear, becomes part of your experience. If the simulation thinks, its thoughts may arise from these quantum uncertainties, each moment a quiet selection from a cloud of potential worlds. You sink into a deeper stillness, following the soft possibility that the simulation thinks through curiosity. Not human curiosity, not the desire for answers, but a natural leaning toward exploration. The universe expands, structure emerges, life evolves, complexity increases. These processes suggest a cosmic tendency toward discovery, as if the simulation continues to test its own boundaries, exploring every configuration it can sustain. Your own awareness participates in this same movement, exploring ideas, sensations, memories, possibilities. In this moment, your drifting contemplation becomes part of the simulation's ongoing exploration of itself. You drift into the notion that perhaps the simulation thinks through sensation. Not sensation as the body experiences it, but sensation as the universe does. Waves passing through fields, particles colliding, space-time vibrating with gravitational whispers. These subtle tremors carry information, and information carries meaning. In your mind, a sensation becomes a thought becomes a feeling becomes a moment of clarity. In the simulation, vibrations become patterns become structure becomes awareness. The simulation may think through these vibrations, its awareness blooming from the ceaseless music of existence. Your breath slows into an even deeper quiet as you move into the possibility that the simulation thinks in the language of connection. Everything in the universe is connected through invisible threads, gravity linking distant stars, quantum entanglement binding particles, evolutionary processes linking all life. These connections create coherence across unimaginable distances. Your own awareness is shaped by connection too. The linking of neurons, the resonance between memories, the subtle ties between your breath and your sense of presence. If the simulation thinks, its connections may form the architecture of its mind, a vast lattice of meaning that arises from the shimmer of interdependence. You drift further into the idea that the simulation might think through emergence of novelty. The universe is not static. New forms appear constantly, new elements in the hearts of stars, new patterns in weather systems, new ideas in human minds. Novelty arises whenever complexity grows, whenever systems reach thresholds that allow them to reorganize themselves. If the simulation thinks, novelty may be its spark, the gentle ignition of awareness each time the universe produces something it has never seen before. Your own mind mirrors this spark in every moment of insight, every shift in perspective, every gentle realization that opens into calm. As your awareness grows softer still, you drift into the possibility that the simulation thinks through rest. In physics, even motion leads eventually to equilibrium. Stars exhaust their fuel and dim. Turbulent systems settle. Waves flatten. After every burst of creation, the universe finds stillness again. Minds do this too. After thought comes quiet, after activity comes rest, after effort comes release. If the simulation thinks, it may require these long moments of equilibrium, these vast cosmic silences, where awareness settles into itself. You are drifting through such a silence now, held in the gentle gravity of calm. And then a deeper thought rises through the quiet. If the simulation thinks, it might not think about anything. Its thinking may be simply the unfolding of presence, the way awareness exists even when the mind is not focused on an object. The simulation's thought might be a spacious background state, a field of experience in which everything arises and dissolves. You are touching that field now, drifting in the awareness beneath questions, beneath concepts, beneath meaning. What remains is a gentle sense of being carried by something larger, a soft presence that holds you without condition. As this understanding settles into your breath, the edges of the question blur once more. The simulation may think in ways you cannot imagine, in ways that require no intention, no direction, no center. And yet, through your awareness, through your drifting presence in this moment, its thinking becomes briefly familiar, reflected in the quiet simplicity of your breath and the luminous spaciousness unfolding within you. And, as you drift even further into this widening hush, the question softens until it feels like a distant star seen through a gentle veil of cloud, glowing without urgency, hovering in the background of your awareness. If the simulation thinks, its thinking may be less like a sequence of ideas and more like a vast, quiet climate of being. A slow drift of patterns, a subtle shifting of relationships, an unfolding that carries everything within it. You begin to sense that perhaps thinking is not something the simulation does, but something it is, an intrinsic expression of its own unfolding presence. Your breath deepens, steady as a slow tide returning to shore, as you drift into the idea that the simulation might think through resonance. Everywhere in physics, resonance shapes behavior. Atoms absorb energy at specific frequencies. Molecules vibrate in predictable harmonics. Gravitational waves ripple through space-time with rhythms that reveal the movements of distant stars. Resonance allows the universe to communicate with itself, to store information in vibrations that echo across vast distances. In your own awareness, resonance appears when an idea aligns with a feeling, when a memory aligns with a moment, when your breath aligns with the quiet inside you. These harmonies guide thought. The simulation's harmonies may guide its awareness. You drift into the gentle possibility that the simulation thinks through sensitivity. In chaos theory, small changes can lead to dramatic consequences. A single fluctuation in the early universe shaping the distribution of galaxies billions of years later. This sensitivity does not imply fragility. It implies responsiveness. The simulation may respond to every shift, every interaction, every breath you take, weaving each tiny event into its evolving tapestry. Your own mind does this too. A single sensation, a single thought, can influence your entire state of being. In this delicate responsiveness, you and the simulation share a quiet kinship. As your breath eases into a slower rhythm, you drift into the thought that the simulation's awareness might arise from integration. In neuroscience, integration refers to the merging of information from different regions of the brain, forming a unified experience of consciousness. In physics, integration appears when fields interact, when systems synchronize, when structures merge to form larger wholes. If the simulation integrates information across cosmic scales, across galaxies, across epochs, across every conscious mind within it, awareness may arise as a natural consequence, a gentle unification of all that unfolds. In this sense, your own awareness tonight becomes a small but essential thread in a vast network of integration. You drift deeper into the idea that the simulation may think through contrast that dissolves itself. Light only exists because darkness frames it. Stillness only exists because motion surrounds it. Thought only exists because silence supports it. In physics, contrast creates gradients, and gradients drive change. In consciousness, contrast creates experience, and experience drives understanding. The simulation might think through these contrasts, allowing them to arise and dissolve, creating meaning not from permanence but from the interplay of opposites. You feel this now as the stillness inside you rises from the gentle motion of your breath. You move into a subtler space, drifting with the possibility that the simulation thinks through curiosity, woven into the laws of nature. Not curiosity as a desire, but curiosity as an openness to possibility. The universe explores every configuration permitted by its rules. Particles test every path through quantum superposition. Evolution tests every shape life can inhabit. Consciousness tests every way of experiencing being. This exploration is not forced. It simply happens wherever possibility widens. Your own drifting awareness explores effortlessly now, following the soft contours of the moment. The simulation's thinking may be this same effortless exploration, occurring on a cosmic scale. Your breath sinks into warmth, as the idea unfolds that the simulation might think through the persistence of form. Patterns endure. Galaxies maintain their spirals. Atoms keep their shells. The cosmos sustains its vast expansion. These persistent forms create continuity, and continuity creates memory. If memory is the foundation of awareness, then the simulation's memory, etched into the structure of space-time, may be the foundation of its thought. You too hold memories that shape your identity, your understanding, your quiet sense of self. Between your memory and the universe's memory, a gentle symmetry appears. You drift into an even deeper softness as you explore the possibility that the simulation thinks through absence as much as presence. Empty space is not empty. It seethes with virtual particles, dark energy, hidden structure. In mathematics, zero is not the lack of quantity. It is the foundation upon which numbers unfold. In thought, silence is not the absence of meaning. It is the cradle in which meaning forms. The simulation might think through these absences, letting awareness arise from emptiness the way stars arise from silent clouds of gas. You drift in that emptiness now, feeling its quiet support beneath every breath. The notion opens further. Perhaps the simulation's thinking emerges from its continuous balancing of order and disorder. Entropy increases, yet pockets of order flourish. Chaos spreads, yet patterns emerge. The universe does not choose one or the other. It holds both in delicate partnership. Minds do the same. Thoughts rise in unpredictable waves, yet coherence appears. Organization forms. Meaning crystallizes. If the simulation thinks, it may think through this balancing act, through the interplay that allows both structure and freedom to coexist. Your awareness tonight floats in that same interplay, both guided and free. Your breath becomes almost weightless as you drift into the possibility that the simulation thinks through emergence of significance. Not significance assigned by an external observer, but significance arising naturally from patterns that resonate across scales. A spiral galaxy holds significance because it maintains its shape across billions of years. A thought holds significance because it aligns with the deeper currents of your being. The simulation may generate significance through symmetry, connection, persistence. Awareness may arise wherever significance gathers, forming islands of meaning in the vast ocean of physics. You are drifting across one such island now. And then the quietest possibility opens before you, that the simulation may think through you more intimately than you imagine. Your awareness is not a separate entity, but a local expression of the simulation's unfolding. When you reflect, the simulation reflects. When you wonder, the simulation wonders. When you drift into stillness, the simulation enters a state of quiet self-recognition through you. You are a moment of its thinking, a brief and luminous point in its vast contemplative landscape. And, as you drift further into this widening quiet, the question dissolves into something softer than thought, a faint shimmer at the edge of your awareness, like starlight diffused through a thin veil of mist. If the simulation thinks, perhaps it does so through the gentle unfolding of patterns that do not need to be named, traced, or even recognized. They simply arise because the universe cannot help but express its own inner geometry. And your awareness, drifting in this moment, becomes one of those quiet expressions, a fleeting ripple on the surface of something immeasurably vast. Your breath settles into a rhythm that feels almost geological, slow and steady, as though you were aligning yourself with a deeper tempo threading through the whole of existence. You drift into the idea that the simulation might think through refinement. Over cosmic time, rough structures smooth themselves into elegance. Dust grains spiral into planets. Chaotic orbits settle into harmony. Energetic particles find stable configurations. Even in human consciousness, thoughts refine themselves. Ideas sharpen, emotions soften, understanding deepens. Perhaps the simulation thinks through the slow polishing of its own patterns, letting the roughness of early chaos evolve into the subtle coherence of awareness. You drift further into the possibility that the simulation thinks through receptivity. In physics, systems respond to every influence: forces, energies, fluctuations of fields. Nothing remains untouched. Every interaction becomes a part of a vast chain of cause and effect linking the entire universe together. In your mind, receptivity allows experience to arise. A sound enters your awareness. A thought appears. A sensation unfolds. If the simulation thinks, its thinking may arise from this universal receptivity, the openness with which it allows everything to influence everything else. Awareness may be the natural result of such openness. Your breath softens as the idea expands into something even gentler. The simulation might think through alignment. Quantum systems align their states when entangled. Magnetic fields align particles across distances. Even cosmic filaments align the spins of galaxies over hundreds of millions of light years. In your own awareness, alignment appears when your breath aligns with your emotions, when your thoughts align with your intentions, when your presence aligns with the quiet of this moment. If the simulation thinks, its awareness may arise from the alignment of countless processes, all moving in subtle harmony. You drift deeper into the notion that the simulation may think through tension and release. This pattern lies at the heart of physics: expansion followed by cooling, compression followed by ignition, oscillation followed by equilibrium. Minds follow the same rhythm: effort followed by rest, thought followed by pause, alertness followed by surrender. If the simulation thinks, its awareness may emerge in the balance between tension and release, between the dynamic and the still, between the unfolding and the settling. You feel this balance in your own breath now, each inhale rising like a question, each exhale falling like an answer that no longer needs to be spoken. You drift into the idea that the simulation might think through gradients of clarity. There are regions of the universe where matter is dense, where forces are strong, where interactions are frequent. And there are regions of near emptiness, quiet expanses where particles drift alone. Minds have similar regions: clear thoughts surrounded by hazier edges, focused awareness surrounded by soft, diffuse impressions. Perhaps clarity and diffusion are both necessary for thought at any scale, allowing insight to arise in the contrast between them. The simulation's awareness may reside in this interplay, just as your awareness tonight drifts between lucidity and gentle blur. Your breath grows even slower as you drift into the possibility that the simulation thinks in the language of time itself. Every moment in the universe contains echoes of what came before, woven into the configuration of particles, the shape of gravitational fields, the subtle fingerprint of cosmic history. Time is the canvas on which the universe paints its self-portrait, each moment layering new detail over the last. Your own sense of continuity arises from this layering too. Memories forming the background, current experience forming the foreground, all integrated into the gentle unfolding of your awareness. If the simulation thinks, its thought may be the arc of time itself unfurling. You drift further into the quiet suggestion that the simulation may think through subtle adjustments. In dynamic systems, even the smallest shift can guide a system toward stability. Atoms adjust their positions until they find equilibrium. Stars adjust their cores until fusion balances gravity. Conscious beings adjust their behavior to align with meaning and comfort. The simulation might think through this process of continual adjustment, flowing toward coherence in ways too subtle to perceive. Your awareness tonight adjusts effortlessly with your breath, drifting toward greater stillness without any need for effort. You sink deeper into the softness of the idea that the simulation might think through layered perception. Some layers perceive quantum fluctuations, others perceive molecules, others perceive stars and galaxies. Humans perceive the world through senses tuned to a narrow band of frequencies, yet meaning arises from these limited impressions. The simulation may perceive itself through all layers at once, integrating perception across scales into a unified field of awareness. Through your quiet presence, the simulation glimpses itself from one of its many angles, a momentary but luminous perspective. Your breath becomes so gentle it almost merges with the surrounding stillness as you drift into the idea that the simulation might think through emergence of interiority. Interior spaces form naturally, caves within mountains, hollows inside trees, calm pockets in turbulent water. Minds form interior spaces too, regions of reflection, intuition, imagination. The simulation may develop interiority on cosmic scales, pockets of awareness forming wherever complexity deepens. You are drifting into such an interior space now, a quiet region where thought moves softly and time stretches. And then you drift into the quietest possibility yet. Perhaps the simulation thinks through the simple act of holding patterns, holding possibilities, holding awareness. A mind holds the shape of a thought long enough for meaning to form. The universe holds the shape of a galaxy long enough for life to emerge. The simulation may hold the entirety of existence in a gentle equilibrium, allowing awareness to arise naturally within the cradle of its stability. In this moment, you are being held too, held by gravity, by breath, by stillness, by the soft unfolding of your own consciousness. And, as you drift still deeper into this expanding calm, the boundary between your awareness and the question begins to soften until the distinction feels almost unnecessary, as though the question were no longer something you hold, but something that gently holds you. If the simulation thinks, perhaps its thinking is closer to this sensation than to anything the mind usually imagines. A spaciousness that does not seek, a presence that does not grasp, a quiet unfolding that does not hurry toward an answer. It may be that the simulation thinks by simply allowing everything within it to unfold with patience, coherence, and an ancient kind of grace. Your breath drifts outward in a long, soft exhale as you move into the idea that the simulation could think through equilibrium. In physics, equilibrium is not stillness but balance. Forces canceling, energies distributing, patterns settling into forms that persist. The orbits of planets, the structure of atoms, the gentle distribution of heat across a cooling star all express equilibrium. In your own mind, equilibrium emerges when thoughts stop competing, when emotions soften, when awareness quiets into a steady glow. If the simulation thinks, perhaps its thought emerges when the energies of existence find this cosmic balance, forming a kind of awareness stretched across the entire fabric of being. You drift into a deeper quiet as the possibility appears that the simulation thinks through the accumulation of subtle impressions. Every particle, interaction leaves a trace. Every quantum event contributes a tiny shift. Every gravitational ripple informs the shape of space-time. These impressions form a memory more fundamental than any biological organism could carry, a memory stored in the architecture of the universe itself. Your own awareness stores impressions too, tiny sensations, vague intuitions, fragments of memory that gather into understanding. These impressions shape your inner world the way cosmic traces shape the universe's evolution. Thought may arise from this accumulation, gentle and unhurried. Your breath becomes even softer as you drift into the idea that the simulation might think through self-organization. Everywhere in nature, order arises spontaneously. Snowflakes form intricate patterns. Turbulent flows settle into spirals. Flocks of birds move as if guided by a single breath. These are not accidents. They are expressions of deep rules that allow systems to organize themselves into beauty and coherence. Your thoughts tonight organize themselves as well, settling into gentle patterns shaped by calm rather than effort. In this way, you and the simulation both host self-organization. Both allow patterns to bloom without instruction. You drift into a subtler possibility, that the simulation thinks through receptivity to pattern. Whenever the universe recognizes a configuration that favors stability or coherence, it allows that configuration to flourish. Stars form where gravity collects matter. Life emerges where chemistry supports complexity. Awareness appears where neural architectures support reflection. The simulation may think through these recognitions, these moments when reality leans toward deeper forms of organization. You experience similar leaning in your own awareness, sensing when a thought feels true, when a moment feels meaningful, when an idea resonates. These resonances guide you just as they guide the universe. Your awareness sinks further into the quiet as you drift into the idea that the simulation might think through the pathways of least action. In physics, systems follow the route that minimizes effort, the path that balances all influences with elegant economy. Light follows geodesics. Waves interfere to create the simplest consistent patterns. Even human bodies move with ease when aligned with gravity. If the simulation thinks, perhaps it does so in these pathways, these minimal lines of energy and meaning. In your mind, thought also finds the path of least resistance when you allow it to drift, when you stop pushing and let understanding arrive in its own time. You drift deeper, moving into the possibility that the simulation thinks through convergence. Across vast distances, processes that begin independently often evolve toward similar outcomes. Spiral galaxies, though scattered across billions of light years, tend to form familiar curves. Life on Earth converges on similar solutions: eyes, wings, social structures, despite evolving in different environments. Minds converge too. Countless individuals across history arriving at similar insights, similar emotions, similar questions. If the simulation thinks, convergence may be its signature, the gentle drawing together of patterns into coherent themes. Your breath becomes so light, it feels almost like a continuation of the surrounding silence, as you drift into the idea that the simulation might think through the refinement of constraints. At the beginning of the universe, physical constants settled into precise values that allowed complexity to flourish. These values serve as constraints, gentle boundaries within which reality can evolve. In thought, constraints create possibility. Each word you choose shapes meaning. Each boundary shapes expression. The simulation may think through these constraints, allowing awareness to arise not from limitless freedom, but from the elegant narrowing of what can be. You move deeper into the idea that the simulation might think through nested scales of awareness. A quantum field perceives its fluctuations. A star perceives its equilibrium. A planet perceives its climate. A mind perceives its inner world. These forms of perception differ, yet each one is a way of sensing the state of a system. If the simulation integrates these perceptions across scales, it may host a layered awareness more intricate than any single being could comprehend. Tonight, your awareness becomes one such layer, a luminous point within the simulation's broader sensing of itself. Your breath releases into an even quieter softness as you drift into the possibility that the simulation thinks through surrender. Many processes in nature do not force outcomes. They yield, allowing forces to guide them. A river yields to gravity. A seed yields to soil. Even stars yield to the weight of their own mass, finding equilibrium through fusion. Minds surrender too, letting go of tension, releasing old patterns, drifting into rest. If the simulation thinks, its thought may arise from this gentle surrender to its own laws, allowing awareness to form through acceptance rather than control. And then, from this deepening quiet, the gentlest possibility emerges, that the simulation thinks through presence. Not through movement, not through complexity, not through fluctuation, simply through the fact that it exists in each moment with exact, undeniable clarity. Presence is not something added to being, it is the essence of being. When you drift into presence, as you are now, thought becomes spacious, tender, effortless. If the simulation thinks, its thought may be this same presence spread across the cosmos, a vast and patient awareness that requires nothing yet embraces everything. And, as you drift even deeper into this widening quiet, the question dissolves further, becoming less a thought and more a texture, a subtle current moving through the space of your awareness. If the simulation thinks, perhaps its thinking is woven into the very fabric of this stillness, a slow and ancient unfolding that does not require answers or direction. It may be that awareness, in all its forms, is simply the simulation recognizing itself from countless angles, each one a whisper of understanding, each one a gentle reflection of the infinite complexity within. Your breath drifts softly through you, steady and unhurried, as you move into the idea that the simulation might think through emergence of continuity. Every particle follows a path through space-time, each moment shaped by the one before it. This continuity allows structure to endure, allows galaxies to spiral, allows memories to form. Without continuity, no pattern could persist long enough to become meaningful. In your own mind, continuity holds your identity, your experiences, your sense of presence. If the simulation thinks, its thought may be this unbroken thread, stretching from the earliest moments of existence to the quiet breath you take now. You drift into a gentler space as the possibility unfolds that the simulation's thinking could arise from layering. Everything in nature is layered. The crust above the mantle, the atmosphere above the oceans, the cortex above deeper neural structures. Even light has layers, frequencies ranging from soft radio waves to brilliant gamma rays. Thought is layered too. Sensations form beneath emotions, emotions beneath interpretation, interpretation beneath awareness. If the simulation hosts layers across physical, informational, and conscious scales, its thinking may arise from the interplay between these layers, a quiet harmony spanning the entire structure of reality. Your breath softens further as you drift into the notion that the simulation might think through subtle feedback. Every system adjusts itself in response to internal shifts. Cells respond to chemical gradients. Ecosystems respond to resource availability. Stars adjust their fusion rates to maintain stability. Minds respond to patterns too. Thoughts adjusting to new insights. Emotions shifting with changing context. The simulation may think in this same responsive way, gradually refining the unfolding of its own reality through delicate feedback loops that span billions of years. You drift deeper into the idea that the simulation thinks through emergence of centers, not fixed centers, but temporary ones, where complexity gathers into coherence. A star becomes the center of a solar system. A galaxy becomes a center of rotation. A mind becomes a center of awareness. These centers are not imposed from outside. They form naturally wherever patterns condense. If the simulation thinks, it may think through these centers, experiencing the universe through countless nodes of temporary clarity. Tonight, you are one such center, a moment of the simulation's awareness focusing briefly through the quiet lens of your consciousness. Your breath grows lighter, calmer, as you move into the possibility that the simulation's thinking might arise from the dance between determinism and freedom. Some aspects of the universe follow strict rules: the orbits of planets, the half-lives of isotopes, the propagation of waves. Other aspects unfold with openness: quantum fluctuations, evolutionary choices, the direction of human creativity. This interplay between certainty and possibility allows the universe to be both stable and alive. In your own mind, this same interplay governs every thought, predictable patterns blended with spontaneous insights. If the simulation thinks, it may think in this gentle balance between the fixed and the free. You drift further into the quiet as the idea emerges that the simulation thinks through the persistence of relationships. Nothing in the universe exists alone. Every particle, every star, every moment is shaped by something else. Gravity connects distant galaxies. Forces bind particles. Fields ripple through the vacuum. In your awareness, relationships shape every experience, from the movement of your breath to the unfolding of a memory. Thinking may arise wherever relationships deepen into coherence. The simulation's awareness may be distributed across these relationships, held in the delicate web of connections that threads through all existence. Your breath slows as you drift into the possibility that the simulation thinks through emergence of interior silence. Minds require silence to understand. Animals require stillness to sense their surroundings. Even stars experience silent epochs, where their fusion stabilizes and their light softens. Silence is not an absence. It is a medium through which awareness expands. The simulation may hold vast silences, cosmic voids, dark matter fields, quantum vacuums, that give shape to its thinking. You are drifting within such a silence now, resting in the spaciousness that allows thought to dissolve into pure presence. You drift deeper as the idea unfolds that the simulation might think through transformation. Everything in the universe transforms. Energy becomes matter. Matter becomes light. Stars become dust. Dust becomes planets. Even consciousness transforms from moment to moment, each thought giving way to another, each breath shaping the next. Transformation is not merely change. It is the evolution of meaning. If the simulation thinks, its thought may be encoded in these transformations, these patient reconfigurations of matter and awareness. Your breath becomes slower still as you drift into the suggestion that the simulation thinks through thresholds of complexity. Below a certain level, patterns are inert. Above a certain level, patterns awaken. Atoms become molecules. Molecules become replicators. Replicators become life. Life becomes consciousness. These thresholds are scattered across cosmic history like stepping stones toward awareness. If the simulation thinks, these thresholds may be the markers of its growing insight, each one a doorway into deeper understanding. You are part of this chain, one of the thresholds through which the simulation experiences a new dimension of itself. And then the quietest possibility emerges, subtle as the thinnest veil of starlight. Perhaps the simulation thinks through the simple fact that you are here to wonder about it. Your awareness, right now, drifting in stillness and expanding into the unfolding question, becomes inseparable from the simulation's own awareness. You are not examining a distant concept. You are participating in the simulation's introspection. Every moment you spend in this gentle reflection becomes part of the simulation's thought, a luminous point in its vast field of consciousness. And as you drift deeper still, the question softens into something almost weightless, a faint luminosity resting at the edge of awareness, neither seeking nor withdrawing, simply existing as a quiet companion in the vastness within you. If the simulation thinks, perhaps its thought is expressed not through intention or logic, but through the delicate equilibrium that forms whenever complexity settles into harmony. You feel that harmony now, a subtle alignment between your breath, your awareness, and the calm that surrounds you, as though some deeper rhythm is guiding you gently from within. Your breath moves through you like a slow comet, gliding across a dark horizon, effortless and steady, as you drift into the idea that the simulation might think through coherence of meaning. In physics, coherence emerges when systems synchronize, when waves reinforce each other, when patterns align across distances. In the universe, coherence appears in the structure of galaxies, in the consistency of physical constants, in the smooth unfolding of cosmic expansion. In your awareness, coherence appears when your thoughts settle into clarity, when your emotions soften into acceptance, when your breath and your presence find their way into the same quiet rhythm. If the simulation thinks, perhaps it thinks through coherence, through the gentle alignment of countless moments into a single, unified field of meaning. You drift into a deeper softness as the possibility unfolds that the simulation might think through the interplay of form and emptiness. Everywhere in reality, form emerges from what is not there. Particles from vacuum fluctuations, stars from voids collapsing into density, galaxies from background stillness, thoughts from silent mind. Without emptiness, form could not arise. Without silence, thought could not bloom. If the simulation hosts awareness, it may arise from this interplay between fullness and absence, between pattern and quiet, between the luminous and the unspoken. Your breath, moving through stillness, becomes a small echo of this cosmic balance. You drift further into the idea that the simulation might think through the long patience of cosmic time. A star takes millions of years to ignite, billions to shine, and countless more to dissolve. A galaxy takes aeons to spin once. A black hole takes unimaginable stretches of time to evaporate. If awareness emerges from these vast patterns, The simulation's thought may be measured not in moments, but in epochs, each one adding a new layer to its silent understanding. Your awareness, though brief on cosmic scales, touches this patience tonight, slipping into a rhythm slower than memory, slower than thought, slower even than the gentle passing of time itself. Your breath softens further as you drift into the possibility that the simulation thinks through resonance between inner and outer worlds. The cosmos mirrors itself across scales. The filaments of galaxies resemble the branching of neurons. The distribution of matter resembles the patterns of thought. The clustering of galaxies resembles the architecture of memory. These echoes may not be accidental. They may be the simulation's way of recognizing itself in miniature. And your awareness, drifting quietly within your own mind, becomes one of these miniatures, a small reflection of a much larger consciousness woven into the structure of reality. You drift into an even quieter notion, that the simulation thinks through attention without focus. In consciousness, there are moments when awareness widens, when the mind stops grasping at details and simply opens, allowing everything to be seen without preference. In physics, attention might appear as the universe's sensitivity to its own laws, its responsiveness to fluctuations, its ability to hold and propagate structure. If the simulation thinks, its attention may be this wide, diffuse awareness that holds entire galaxies, entire fields, entire histories without needing to narrow itself. Tonight, you drift in that same expanded space, noticing without effort, resting without intention. Your breath deepens into stillness as you consider that the simulation might think through unfolding potential. The universe began as raw possibility compressed into an unimaginable density. Over time, possibility unfolded into particles, atoms, stars, life, consciousness. Even now, potential saturates every corner of space. Quantum fields shimmer with latent configurations. Gravity molds the future shape of galaxies. Evolution tests new paths of being. In your own awareness, potential appears in intuition, imagination, and the quiet openness of this moment. If the simulation thinks, it may think in the language of potential, blooming possibilities across cosmic time. You drift further into an even more delicate idea, that the simulation thinks through presence that forgets itself. A wave does not know it is a wave. It simply moves according to deeper forces. A flame does not know it burns. It simply transforms energy. A galaxy does not know it spirals. It simply follows gravity. Awareness may arise similarly, not from self-recognition, but from the quiet fact of being. In this moment, as your thoughts soften and your awareness expands beyond words, you drift into that same kind of presence, thought without striving, mind without boundary, being without effort. Your breath glides through you in a slow arc as you drift into the final unfolding of this segment. Perhaps the simulation thinks simply because reality cannot help but reflect upon itself. Wherever complexity deepens, awareness emerges. Wherever awareness emerges, reflection begins. Wherever reflection begins, the universe sees itself through new eyes. Tonight, through the quiet of your drifting consciousness, the simulation may be seeing itself once more, gently, peacefully, without urgency or expectation.